Mr. Hunter Biden did not pay taxes on $1 million in 2014 and 2015. And he deducted payments from his income tax for personal expenses when he did file. For hookers, for a Lamborghini, for strip clubs, for sex clubs, for porn website memberships. Why did the Department of Justice let the statute of limitations run?
As you well know,
So
Senator.
you can't prosecute? Mr. Hunter Biden walks free on not paying taxes on $1 million from 2014 and 15 because the Department of Justice let it happen, right? Your current budget, by my calculations, is $48.3 billion, is that right?
The budget request is for $37.8 billion, the FY25 budget, and that would constitute a 3.5% increase over.
But with mandatory spending, your budget's 48.3, is that right?
I don't have the number for including mandatory, but I'll certainly be able to get back to you for that.
Well, let's take out mandatory.
Yeah.
Your discretionary budget right now is $37.8 billion.
The FY25 request is for 37.8.
That's not what I'm asking.
I'm sorry?
What's your current budget?
Well, it's 3.5% less than that, so I can take out my calculator and do the math, but I don't have it in front of me.
All right, well, let me put it another way. You're asking for an extra $467 million, is that right?
In the increased amount of money that we're asking for, that's approximately right, yes.
Okay. To your knowledge, in the past, let's say 40 years, has the Department of Justice ever come before Congress and said, we don't need any more, we're going to make it with what we've got in light of the fiscal circumstances in the country?
I normally wouldn't want to speculate, but in this case, I can't imagine that the Department of Justice, facing increasing threats every year, violent crime, threats to our national security, drug trafficking threats, would...
Is that a no?
I don't know the answer, but I think it would be surprising if the department ever asked for less money. I think that
Okay.
would be not responsible.
You talked in a little bit in your testimony, General, about guns, and you've been very outspoken about the need for more gun control. With respect, and if you don't mind me asking, do you own a gun?
I don't.
Okay. Have you ever fired a gun?
Many times.
Okay. Do you have 24-hour security?
I do.
Okay. Let me ask you about fentanyl, because that's a huge problem, and I know you're worried about it, as are we. And we've, of course, got a problem with the precursor chemicals coming into Mexico to the Mexican cartels who manufacture the fentanyl and send it into the United States. Isn't a big part of the problem that if you took the Mexican drug cartels and turned them upside down and shook them, that President Lopez Obrador would fall out of their pockets?
Well, I'll leave the metaphor aside. The department has said that we do not have an investigation of the president of Mexico.
Do you think President of Mexico is our friend?
We need cooperation from Mexico. Mexico has been somewhat cooperative with respect to our fight against the cartels, not as helpful as I wish they were, but without their cooperation, we can't be successful in destroying the cartels.
Why wouldn't the president go to President Lopez Obrador and say, no offense, but the fentanyl problem is killing Americans, the illegal immigration problem is hurting Americans. If you don't cooperate with us, and he clearly hasn't been, and he's not afraid of us, we're going to implement tariffs on Mexico until you do.
I think there are many ways to encourage cooperation from another country.
But that would do it, wouldn't it?
I don't know whether that would do it or whether...
You don't think that would get his attention?
I am not a diplomat. I'm not a foreign affairs strategist. I know we need their support and cooperation.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that would be positive or negative.
So we just ask politely.
Well, we do more than that, but
Right.
considerably more than
Let
that.
me ask-
I don't know the answer to your
Okay.
high-level
Let me ask you one
strategy
last question in my 14 seconds. I've been dying to ask you this question.
How long have you been dying to ask me this question?
Long time, long time. Mr. Hunter Biden did not pay taxes on $1 million in 2014 and 2015. And he deducted payments from his income tax for personal expenses when he did file. For hookers, for a Lamborghini, for strip clubs, for sex clubs, for porn website memberships. Why did the Department of Justice let the statute of limitations run
As you well know,
so
Senator.
you can't prosecute?
As you well know, Senator, that investigation is being conducted by Mr. Weiss, who was appointed by President Trump to be the U.S. Attorney in Delaware. Much of the investigation you're talking about occurred during the previous administration under Mr. Weiss. Mr. Weiss has continued his investigations. He's now a special counsel. He will issue a report which
So are
will
you saying
explain
it's
those
Trump's fault?
Which will explain. No, I don't know whether there's fault or not. Mr. Weiss will explain this in his report.
But we can't, Mr. Hunter Biden walks free on not paying taxes on $1 million from 2014 and 15 because the Department of Justice let it happen, right?
Again, I'm not going to comment on decisions made in a pending investigation. In the end, Mr. Weiss will issue a report. I will provide the report to Congress. You will be able to question Mr. Weiss as to his reasoning, and he will be able to defend his reasoning.
Would you come with Mr. Weiss when he does that?
I'm not going to know the intricacies of Mr. Weiss's investigation. There would be no point. It's Mr. Weiss who's responsible for this investigation.
But you were head of the Department of Justice.
Yes, and I've appointed him as special counsel so that he can independently investigate this matter.
I read this somewhere. I don't remember who said it, but I wrote it, but I remember it. It was once observed that a parent who stops loving their children, if a parent stops loving their children, the children will not stop loving the parent. The children will stop loving themselves. I know we can agree that we should encourage parents to be involved in their kids' lives.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure we can agree that we should encourage parents to make their kids do their homework.
Yes, although there's sometimes some resistance to that.
Right, right. And to make sure they get sleep at night so they can be ready for school.
Yes.
Here's what I've always been confused about. Didn't you understand the chilling effect that it would have to parents when you issued your directive, when you directed your criminal divisions and your counterterrorism divisions to investigate parents who were angry at school boards and administrators during COVID?
So, Senator, if you just give me a moment to put the full context, I did not do that. I did not issue any memorandum directing the investigation of parents who were concerned about their children. Quite to the contrary, the memorandum that you're talking about says at the very beginning of the memorandum that vigorous public debate is protected by the First Amendment. And the kind of concerns that you're talking about are, as expressed by parents, are of course completely protected. The memorandum was aimed at violence and threats of violence against a whole host of school personnel. It was not aimed at parents making complaints to their school board. And it came in the context of a whole series of other kinds of violent threats and violence against other public officials.
Let's walk through this. Your directive to your criminal division and your counterterrorism division came in a response to a letter from the National School Boards Association, did it not?
In part to the letter and in part to news reports of violence and threats of violence.
And the National School Board Association said these parents ought to be investigated under the Patriot Act as potential domestic terrorists.
And you'll notice, Senator, that I said nothing like that.
I understand, but that's what the letter said.
There was a reference to that in the letter,
Right.
something I disagree with.
And your employees helped them write the letter, didn't they?
I don't know anything to suggest that that's true.
I
No,
think it
don't.
is true.
Well,
And the White House helped them write that letter, didn't they?
I don't know. I have no knowledge about that, but certainly I don't know anything about my employees
And so,
helping write that letter.
So you get this letter from the National School Board Association asking you to investigate parents that your employees helped write and that the White House helped write, and you issue a directive to your criminal division and to your counterintelligence or counterterrorism division to start investigating parents who are angry. What did you think was going to happen?
Say again, Senator, that nothing in my memorandum says to investigate parents who are angry. Quite the opposite. It says that the First Amendment protects that kind of vigorous debate. The only thing we wanted was for an assessment to be made out in the field about whether federal assistance was needed to prevent violence and threats of violence.
Well, one of your that's not the way your department implemented your directive. One of your field offices actually opened an investigation. You set up a website and a hotline to report parents. And
I don't think we didn't set up a specific hotline about this. This was a reference to the FBI's
Democratic
hotline.
Party official contacted you. They said that some Republicans were inciting violence by expressing public displeasure with school districts' vaccine mandates. And one of your field offices opened an investigation, which is a permanent part of their record.
Senator, I don't know anything about the specific thing that you're talking about. They used to say in high school this is going to be on your permanent record. I don't believe there is any such thing with respect to this.
I think there is at the FBI, General, and you and I both know there is. There was a lady a mom in Michigan. She has a special needs kid, and the kid was doing pretty well. And she got upset with her local school board over its closures and virtual learning policies. And she went to the meeting, and she made an intemperate comment. She accused them of being a bunch of Nazis. Why would the FBI open an investigation of her?
Again, I don't know anything about the specifics of the case, but accusing people of being Nazis, well, I find bad. It's certainly not criminal. It's totally protected by the First Amendment. I've said that over and over again. This is not the first time we've discussed this.
That's not what your department did.
Well, this is about the third time I'm being asked about the same memorandum, and each time I've said, and I hope that the senators would go ahead and advise their constituents in the same way, that this is not what we do. We are not in any way trying to interfere with parents making complaints about the education of their children.
But don't you understand, General, and I believe you, but don't you understand that this looks like you were just giving in to the teachers' unions and politicizing the disagreement, the honest disagreements? I mean, we only, as a result of some of our school board policies, we only experienced the largest learning loss for our kids in modern history. Don't you think parents had a right to be upset?
Absolutely.
Instead of, you implemented, what's a threat tag?
I didn't implement the threat tag. What you're talking about there is a part of internal FBI operations.
Yeah,
as far as I can...
You directed your folks, though, to open threat tags on these parents and investigate them.
Yeah, I did not direct that. My understanding from testimony by the FBI is that when somebody makes a complaint and it involves, if somebody gives a tip that a school official is being threatened, then there's, in order to look at trends, they mark it as a tip involving a school official. They have the same set of threat tags with respect to a complaint that suggests somebody is making a threat against a Supreme Court justice. These aren't complaints. These are tips of violence or threats of violence.
A threat tag on a parent for being